Mara Ellison liked to joke that she kept her suitcase closer than her slippers. At 71, retirement hadn't softened her appetite for travel or for family. It had simply made her choosier about both. On the morning the family cruise was supposed to launch, a plan circled on calendars and text threads. For months she was up before the gulls, humming in her small Charleston kitchen. The kettle whistled. Earl Grey steamed in her favorite chipped mug. By the door sat her overnight bag, zipped and ready, wide-brimmed hat tucked on top like a promise. Her phone buzzed. One message from her daughter, Elise. "You won't come on the cruise. Genevieve prefers it to be just family." Mara read it once, twice. A third time, as if repetition could turn it into a misfire of autocorrect. The steam blurred her glasses. The letters stayed cruelly crisp. Just family. 2 words that erased her, as if bloodlines could be unwritten by someone else's preference. The house seemed to shrink around her, same cabinets, same kettle, but suddenly airless. She set the phone down carefully, as if gentleness could undo the bruise. On the hallway chair, her passport waited in its leather sleeve. Habit had placed it there. Hope had assumed she would show it at the terminal by mid-morning. She thought of the deposit she'd paid to secure 2 cabins. She thought of the credit card she'd used just to make booking easier. Her name ran through every line item like thread, and her name was on something else, something longer lived than a cruise confirmation number. She went to the study and slid open the drawer where a leather file slept. It creaked when she lifted it to the desk, a small, familiar sound that steadied her hands. Inside, in tidy order, lay the papers that had defined the past decade: the deed to Elise's house, the mortgage statements, the property tax receipts. Years earlier, when Elise and her husband, Aaron, were too young in the bank's eyes, she had co-signed just to help. She had supplied the down payment when they came up short, covered taxes the year Aaron's job vanished, and quietly, painfully sent the final mortgage check from her pension. Each document was dated and filed the way a former administrator files everything: proof against lost memory, proof against being told a different story later. Today, the papers felt like proof against being erased. The phone chimed again, a new email from her credit card company. Alert. New charge, $640. Serenity Deck Spa renewal. Mara stared. Serenity Deck was the ship's spa. The ship she was no longer welcome to board. Heat rose in her chest, less rage than clarity. She had offered her card months ago for convenience and never unlinked it. Apparently, convenience flowed only one way. She called the number on the back of the card. "That charge wasn't authorized," she said, level. "Please cancel the card." The representative asked if the card was lost. "Yes," Mara answered, surprised by how true it felt. "I lost the trust that came with it." When she hung up, she wasn't shaking. She was awake. 2 days later, she climbed the narrow stairs to a familiar office on Meeting Street. The brass plate still read, Samuel Price, attorney at law. Decades ago, he'd helped settle her late husband's estate. He'd always listened more than he spoke, a quality that made you tell him the important parts first. Now he rose from behind his desk and shook her hand. "You don't call unless it matters," he said. "It matters." She placed the leather file between them. He read in silence, the clock ticking calmly behind him. Finally, he adjusted his glasses. "Your name remains on the deed. No transfer, no quitclaim, no recorded change. Legally, you are co-owner. Practically, you hold authority to sell or to require a buyout without their consent." The words landed like oxygen after a held breath. Years of giving and excusing had disguised the simple truth. She hadn't just helped, they had needed her, and the law still recognized it. "Before you decide," Samuel added, "you should know your options. We can pursue a sale, or we can arrange a mediated agreement. They refinance, reimburse your contributions, and you release your interest. Either way, we'll do it by the book." Mara nodded. Something inside her, something that had been hunched small, sat up. "Start the mediation," she said. "If we can do this cleanly, I want clean." On the bus ride home, the winter light slanted across Charleston in thin gold bands. She let herself remember a few scenes she'd shelved. The Christmas she was seated by the kitchen door because it was more convenient. the baby shower she learned about from a photo after the frosting had already been cut. The phrase "you're too intense" delivered in patient tones, as if love had a volume knob and she'd been irresponsible with it. The small cuts made sense now. They formed a path. In her study, while gathering papers for Samuel, she found a thin blue folder tucked behind envelopes. Inside were printouts of emails, Elise to her mother-in-law, Genevieve to Elise, language about long-term occupancy, and pushing for a quitclaim if they could show consistent utilities. Plans framed as inevitabilities, tactical politeness. It stung. It also steadied her. Strategy could be met with structure. Samuel scheduled a mediation with an independent counselor. They met in a quiet room that smelled faintly of eucalyptus and coffee. Elise arrived red-eyed, defensive, then visibly tired. Aaron looked as if he hadn't slept. Genevieve's expression was brittle with certainty. Mara placed the leather file on the table and spoke first. "I'm not here to relitigate holidays," she said. "I'm here to set terms and to end confusion. I co-own your home. I've paid more than my share. I will not be erased from the facts of that. We have two options. You refinance and reimburse my contributions with fair interest, and I'll sign a quitclaim, or we prepare the property for sale. Either way, boundaries begin today." Genevieve started to object something about family and generosity, but the mediator lifted a hand. "Let's hear the proposal through." Samuel slid a breakdown across the table. Down payment totals, tax coverages, mortgage payoff, interest calculations, a 90-day timeline with benchmarks. Numbers don't scold. They simply assemble themselves into accountability. Elise's face crumpled. "Mom, it wasn't supposed to be like this," she said, voice catching. "The message about the cruise," Genevieve said. "To call me not family?" Mara asked, gently but without yielding. "We can respect each other without rewriting who we are." Silence stretched. Then Aaron spoke. "We can refinance," he said. "We'll make it work." The mediator nodded. "Good, then let's define work." They agreed to automatic payments to Mara's account, a recorded memorandum of understanding, and penalties for delay. They agreed that during the 90 days, Genevieve would have no administrative role in decisions about the house. That clause landed without comment, which was itself a comment. On day 10, Mara moved a portion of what she was owed into a $529 plan for her granddaughter, Juniper, with Elise named neither owner nor trustee. Direct benefit, Mara told Samuel. No middle hands. He smiled and filed the paperwork. On day 30, Mara attended her first session as a volunteer at the Charleston Senior Resource Center. Tuesday mornings, she sat with widows and veterans and young parents, spreading out contracts like maps, translating interest rates and balloon clauses into plain speech. She taught people how to say no to the phrase, "just one signature," and how to ask for every promise in writing. Each time someone exhaled in relief, she felt an old ache loosen inside her. The refinance closed on day 65. The cashier's check wasn't triumph. It was ballast, proof that the floor under her feet was real. She signed the quitclaim in Samuel's office. "Boundaries kept," he said. "Boundaries honored," she corrected, and shook his hand. Apologies arrived not in grand gestures, but in small, repeated acts. Elise began to call without asking for favors. Aaron repaid a minor expense he could have ignored. Genevieve, who had calibrated so much from the edges, offered a plain apology that did not ask to be comforted. "I overstepped," she said. "I'm sorry." It was not friendship. It was the beginning of respect. Spring drifted towards summer. One afternoon, Elise texted a photo of Juniper in swim goggles, beaming. "Can we try again?" Not the cruise, just a weekend us. No themes, no scripts, just family. The words added carefully, like returning a borrowed object. Mara looked at her suitcase by the door and laughed softly. "I have one rule," she texted back. "We don't spend what isn't ours, money, patience, or names." They met in Savannah for 2 nights, neutral ground and gentle weather. They walked under live oaks and ate shrimp and grits, and nobody mentioned who sat where. On the second evening, on a hotel terrace, Juniper curled against Mara's side and asked, "Will we ever go on a ship together?" "Maybe," Mara said, "but we don't need a ship to start over." They did take a cruise months later, by choice and on everyone's terms. Not the original itinerary, but a smaller loop with unspectacular ports and generous stretches of open water. On the deck at sunset, wide-brimmed hat shading her eyes, Mara watched Juniper count pelicans and felt the lightness that arrives when you've put down what you were never meant to carry. Elise slipped her hand through Mara's arm. "Thank you," Elise said. "For the house, for the lesson, for not disappearing." "I did disappear," Mara said, smiling, "from the parts I mistook for love." Elise nodded. "Then I'm glad you came back." Mara lifted her teacup. The ship served an honest Earl Grey and breathed in the steam. She hadn't lost the title of mother. She had reclaimed its job description: to love fiercely, to teach boundaries, to leave an inheritance of respect. On the horizon, the water brightened into a narrow road of gold. She didn't rush it. Some trips begin when you finally decide where you won't go again.